Welcome back to the Spitfire podcast. I'm your host, Motso. And today we're talking moving from data to AI, how businesses move from stronger foundations to RevOps. And today I'm in discussion with none other than Brandon, our head of implementation and AI development expert. Welcome to the pod, Brandon.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So today's discussion, Brandon, is pretty much around AI governance and AI change management and AI applications, right? And my first question to you is when to use AI to understand a problem. So I just want to understand from you basically, like, when should businesses consider using AI in terms of like understanding a problem that they have?
So I think that the really important thing you've got to do as a business is have a clearly defined problem, right? So I think what a lot of a mistake that a lot of people and a lot of businesses make is try to utilize AI just for the sake of utilizing AI.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the reality is that AI is a tool like any other tool. So like any other subscription that you pay for, if you're a handyman, you've got your toolbox full of hammers and screwdrivers and that kind of thing. And you want to approach AI in a similar way, in the sense that it's only going to be as good as the inputs that you give it. It's only going to be as good as the scenario that you use it in. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Having said that it's a tool, it's a revolutionary tool. But I think what's important is for businesses to understand their problem really, really well. And over and above that is the quality of the data and information, the context that you give your AI. So I think it's having a clear picture of the tools that are available to you and the scenarios in which those work well, and then making sure that you've got those foundations in place. So good quality data, well-defined problem, and then, that's where you're going to get the best results out of AI. Absolutely.
Interesting. You mentioned something that AI is like any other subscription that you have. So my follow-up question is that how do you know that you are ready for AI? Like, how does the businesses know that they are ready for AI? And what are some of the foundations that needs to be in place, basically, in order for a business to start making use of AI?
Yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack there. And I think it ties in very much with what we spoke about a second ago. I always find it remarkable how, despite the conversation always naturally turning super technical, when we talk about AI, we talk about technology and how powerful all of these models are. But actually one of the single-handedly the biggest success factor of AI in business is human beings, so you get this kind of contrapositive often like the more impact you want your AI and your technology in your business to have, the more you need to actually focus on the human beings. And so I think obviously a second ago we spoke about having a very clearly defined problem, which is really important. We spoke about having good quality data to power those AI use cases. I think the third thing for me is having a healthy culture among the people in the organization. And even that, there's a lot to unpack there. But the conversations that we find ourselves having with people is going, people need to think like problem solvers, idea people. And I think, I suppose in terms of, talking about human beings and their upskilling, there's kind of two facets to that as well. There's the hard skills, that people can learn at as the soft skills. I'm not sure if that's really the right terminology for it.
Yeah.
But, so having that on one end of the spectrum, being a sort of a creative problem solver, being an idea person, I actually like to refer to as, having kind of an entrepreneurial mindset, really help to use those tools really well. But then there's also the hard skills. And then one that I talk about a lot is it actually requires good communication, right? Good communication skills, because you've got to become very good at writing clear prompts if we're talking LLMs, and giving really good quality context, so that you don't get, poor quality output. So, in addition to, as I mentioned, program and quality data, it's definitely about creating a healthy culture with the people in your organization, because, as we say, it's a tool and it's only going to be as good as the person wielding the tool.
No, that's interesting. And that leads basically to my second question is that how do you create hunger within an organization for people to start making use of these tools? Because you already mentioned that there needs to be that entrepreneurial mindset, but is there anything else that can actually create that hunger for people to want to use these tools?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, again, there's some irony in how much we have to understand human beings and human psychology in order to really get the most out of our technology. I think that, something that I talk about a lot is human beings are driven by convenience. Before the age of AI, or the modern AI, we would spend a huge amount of time talking about user experience and stuff. Obviously, that's all still relevant. But if you're talking about user experience on a website or a mobile application, for example, 9 times out of 10, all those principles really equate to is, how can we increase the convenience factor of this tool to build it? And I think that understanding that motivation can be key in driving, as you call it, the hunger to implement AI within the organization. If we can demonstrate to people how much more impact they're able to have while using these tools, how much easier it can make their work, how much more they can do, I think it's kind of a natural progression. And it's not nearly as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
There's another psychological factor in human beings that makes that pretty difficult, and that's people's aversion to change. As human beings, we are averse to change, and I often speak about the fact that it's biological. Our roots, like people biologically, change would be significant because it may mean danger or something like that, or risk. And so, you got to kind of ease people through that process. You'll find some people, like early adopter type people, will do it to really jump in.
Yes.
You probably won't, but that's probably not going to be your people that you got to spend the most time on. People you got to spend the most time on are people who feel like AI is coming to take their job, which, as we know, is not going to happen, or at least not the way that a lot of people believe that it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think it's easing people through that, and honestly, probably the best way to do that is to just ensure that you're having the conversations a lot of the time. And whatever that looks like within your business and your culture, it'll look different fun for different businesses. I mean, at Spitfire, what we do is we do our Wednesday sections. For example, every week we're sharing use cases and stories and demonstrating the positive impact that these things can have. I also think, it's important to have AI champions within your business, and whether that's something that you define super formally, it will depend on your business and your culture and that kind of thing. But identifying the key people who really are interested and who really are utilizing these tools and finding new ways to utilize them, driving the use cases, that can really help to proliferate that culture as well. I think what we see some businesses doing that is probably not optimal is, having one person to drive AI adoption
Yeah.
business, and inherently going to have limitations because one person can't be in everybody's face all the time. So driving that conversation, helping people who feel averse to change to kind of navigate through that, and really demonstrating the utility, I think is what eventually starts to create that hunger within the organization.
That's interesting, Brandon, because you touch on very key aspects of change, right? Because a lot of people, especially when we talk about new technology, it takes a bit of time. There are early adopters and then there are late adopters. But another key area that I wanted us to chat base on is AI governance. So I just wanted to ask you basically, like, how does AI governance look like for the modern organizations that are experimenting with AI?
Yeah, it's a nuanced thing, I think. And I mean, I suppose my disclaimer here is to say that I'm not a legal expert in any way, so this should not constitute legal advice to anybody. But certainly, what you've got to do is you've got to obviously make sure that you've got the right people in the right places in your organization. So one thing that we recommend is forming like an AI governance council in your organization, which essentially, means stakeholders from all of the key functions of your business, bringing those people together. And that way, what you can do is you can review use cases of AI within your business, so you can look at the things that people are doing and the tools that people are using, and ensure that, you've got some way of tracking that stuff. So I think probably step number one for a lot of businesses is to ensure that you've got some way of tracking what AI is being used in your business and how it's being used. And that's, I think, not nearly as simple as it sounds, because at the end of the day, there's, no shortage of platforms out there at the moment that provide people access to LLMs. There's no shortage of LLMs out there. And, so you potentially got people going and signing up for tools you might not even be aware of as a business. And that can be really dangerous. So it's about making sure, I think, as a starting point, that you've got steps in place. Maybe that looks like a form, that people can fill in to describe use cases and tools that they're utilizing on a day-to-day basis, and those things can be routed to your. Yeah, I mean, we call it an AI governance council. That's your sort of committee of important stakeholders within your business. And I suppose second to that is understanding or making sure you've got a clear framework to assign risk to those use cases. So, you've got low, medium, and high risk, perhaps, depending how you want to term it. And there's obviously a lot of frameworks, security frameworks that we can take guidance from in terms of like ISO certifications, and the EU AI Act, and assign risk, to those use cases, and based on their risk, pull the right stakeholders in to make decisions on how those use cases are, whether they're approved or they're not approved, and who has the ability to act on them. And a lot of that will depend on, your business and how you work. But I suppose then the third recommendation that I give is familiarize yourself with the pre-existing frameworks. Okay. So like I mentioned, you got ISO, which is obviously a long-standing framework. Your AI Act, which is relatively new and still, shifting in certain ways. but it's very, very well defined. I mean, that it goes hand in hand with like GDPR, for example. I mean, Europe is, by all accounts, kind of the best authority on data governance and privacy and security and that kind of thing. So become accustomed with those frameworks. Okay, a lot of them are. I think there's obviously small detail in them, but a lot of them actually 80% comes down to common sense. Or maybe that's a bad way to put it. That kind of takes back on the importance of it. But what I mean to say is a lot of them have got sort of high level principles that are relatively easy to embed in your day-to-day business operations. And if you kind of start by like getting a clear picture of how those things work, that can build your foundation from a governance perspective. So the work of like, what is risky and what isn't risky and how to protect people from these things, a lot of the time has been done, with these frameworks. It's about just start becoming familiar with it, implementing it in your business. So, I mean, in summary, I think it's certainly the most ideal starting point for a lot of businesses is identify your key stakeholders, make sure that you've got processes and systems in place to keep track of who's utilizing AI in your business and how. And then, have suitable approval processes and review processes based off of things like ISO and the EU AI Act and GDPR and that part.
Awesome. Well, Brandon, you've given us a whole much, and I think a lot of our audience would really appreciate some of the advice that you've given us today. And with that, I'd like to thank you for making time to chat with us, and hope we'll have another conversation soon in and around AI and AI applications and so forth. So thank you so much, Brandon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Cheers.